Welcome, everybody. We're just waiting on others to join us.
No. I'm not here looking so big.
That could be the nature of the beast. Hello from Philadelphia. We're just going to wait just a couple more minutes as people come in and get settled. I see the numbers climbing. Folks in Illinois and Colorado. Andrea, hi. Oh, we have people. Oh, Vincent. Hi, Vincent. Michigan. We have people from all over the country, including DC. So Mustafa, oh, hi, Omar. Do you want to wait a few minutes or?
You give folks one more minute, and then I guess maybe we could get started. You can kick us off.
I will, most definitely.
Okay.
Please, everyone, just keep entering your, where you're tuning in from, and welcome. Wow. Looks like we're slowing down a little. People can get started. I will give it another minute. Hi, Richard. I would like to welcome the Environmental Justice Program new Associate Vice President. He's not on the screen right now, but today is his first day, Dr. Jacob Carter. So I just wanted to welcome him on behalf of the EJ team. So welcome, Jacob.
Absolutely.
All right. I think that we should go ahead and get started. So greetings and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Clean Economy Coalition of Color, or CECC Roundtable. A little bit about the CECC. It's an alliance of some of the nation's most insightful Black, Latinx, Latin, Indigenous, Asian, and Pacific Islander leaders and advocates of color that are committed to amplifying ideas, recommendations, and solutions to uplift priorities and economic interests of historically marginalized communities. So this is an important roundtable collection of people, and this is the most important EJ panel. I'm so glad that you all decided to attend. This month's CECC meeting, which is the third this year, is a special convening to discuss how the Environmental Justice Advisory Council, or EJAC, members have been navigating changes in the political landscape and how community members and others are remaining resilient. This roundtable is particularly timely, given that this year marks 34 years since the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit, which I admit that I attended, and it was held in Washington, D.C. in 1991. Of course, I was just an infant. Communities across the country have continued to work towards a future where they can breathe clean air and drink safe water and live in healthy communities. Now we're facing new and more dangerous challenges, but we're also implementing new solutions, and hopefully we'll be sharing that information from not only the panel, but others in the audience tonight. So before I introduce the members of the EJAC, I wanted to just give you a quick history of its inception under the direction of then Vice President of Environmental Justice, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. The National Wildlife Federation, under the leadership and support of the Environmental Justice Program, launched the EJAC in 2023. It was created to provide an independent source of advice and recommendations to the National Wildlife Federation. And the purpose of that was to uplift vulnerable communities. And the efforts of the EJAC are designed to include recommendations on the evaluation and direction of a broad range of strategies: scientific, technological, regulatory, community engagement, artistic, and economic issues that relate to environmental justice, to climate, and to community revitalization. And of course, as the needs of the Federation and of frontline and fence line communities evolve, so will our focus and our priorities as both an EJAC and the Environmental Justice Program. I do want to point out that the EJAC is the first of its kind in the nonprofit sector, and that is quite important. We are always looking to add new members. A couple of our advisory council members could not be here this evening for personal reasons, but we do want to acknowledge them, and I will do so in a minute. So before I turn the program over to our moderator for this roundtable, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, I would like to introduce the members of the EJAC that are present this evening. And I'll begin with the co-chairs and continue alphabetically. And I'll list those present and those who may not be present, but who are members of the EJAC. First, I'll begin with Diane Dillon Ridgely, who has for 4 decades been an environmentalist and human rights activist and a leader in sustainability and conservation. The next person that I'll introduce is the second co-chair, Dr. Nataki Osborne-Jelks. She is a nationally recognized leader in engaging urban communities and youth of color and environmental stewardship through hands-on watershed and land restoration initiatives and environmental education and training. In 2001, she co-founded the Atlanta Earth Tomorrow program, and I invite you to read more about that on National Wildlife Federation's website. It is phenomenal. She's also board chairperson of the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, also known as WAWA, which is a community-based organization that launched the Atlanta Children's Forest Network in partnership with the USDA Forest Service and US EPA, as it was then. Next is Ms. Monica Lewis-Patrick, who is an educator, an entrepreneur, and human rights activist, with guidance and support from the other 4 founders of We the People of Detroit and the leadership of volunteers and community experts. She's become one of the most distinguished social justice experts in Michigan, nationwide, and globally, and is known as the Water Warrior. She is actively engaged in the struggle for access to safe, affordable water for all under-resourced communities. Mr. John Redcloud is the next person I'd like to introduce. He is the Director of Development and Managing Director of Red Cloud Renewables. The mission of Red Cloud Renewable is to help tribal members and communities move towards energy independence. John Redcloud is a 6th-generation direct descendant of Chief Red Cloud, and his 4 children are the 7th generation. John says he finds inspiration knowing that he's doing something good and positive in the world. Next, we have Mark Mangana, who couldn't be with us this evening, but he's the founding president and CEO of Green Latinos, which is a community of Latino, Latina, and Latin environmental conservation and climate justice champions who use cultural connections, shared resources, and collective power to advocate for their environmental justice priorities and their environmental liberation. And I would like to next introduce Reverend Leo Woodbury, with over 20 years experience managing nonprofit and for-profit organizations. He's accumulated a wealth of knowledge, partnerships, alliances, and expertise in the environmental justice movement. The South Carolina State Senate presented him with an award in recognition of his community service. And he's pastor of Kingdom Living Temple, executive director of New Alpha Community Development Corporation, both in Florence, South Carolina, and a member of the South Carolina Environmental Justice Network. I definitely invite you all to read more about our esteemed Environmental Justice Advisory Council on our website. To the panelists, thank you all for participating in this exciting panel this evening and for serving on our EJAC. I'm so grateful to have you in both spaces, and the real work begins in a few weeks as we seek your guidance and input on what our work looks like going forward. And we want to share the success of the work that we've been doing. So now I'll hand the program over to our moderator this evening, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, Executive Vice President at the National Wildlife Federation.
Thank you, Dr. Hollis. I appreciate you. You all saw how Dr. Hollis, she is also co-moderating the panel tonight. So she thinks she's slick, but we're family and family is allowed to do that. I'm incredibly blessed to be able to be here surrounded by so many amazing leaders who have got the work done, right? They've done the work in good times and in hard times. They have not only the intellect, but they've also rolled up their sleeves and made sure that there's real transformation inside of communities. I always have to give a shout out to the D, one of the places that I was blessed to grow up in. And then of course, Atlanta's like my second home. So if you see me leaning a little bit toward that direction, you understand what's going on. I was thinking about how would we start this incredibly important conversation tonight out. And I was thinking about some words of somebody who was a friend, mentored me a little bit, who passed away recently. And she once said that you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference. And you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. And those are the words of Jane Goodall. I was blessed to be able to spend time with her, to listen, to learn, along with the amazing folks you see here on the screen and so many other incredible leaders who are doing everything they can each and every day. Now we turn on the television, and when we turn on that television, we often see all kinds of things that are going on. Some that are challenging, but often we don't hear about the amazing work that is also continuing to be able to move forward. James Baldwin once said, those of you who don't know who James Baldwin is, pull out your phones and make sure you Google him. James Baldwin once said that if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. Often the work that goes on in our most vulnerable communities is not seen, is of course not resourced and then financed. And those amazing stories often aren't brought forward in the way that we need to be able to help people to know that making investments in our communities yields positive results and is also the right thing to do. So the state of environmental justice right now. We have experts who are here on the screen. They're going to walk us through some of the amazing work they're doing. Folks have submitted some questions that we will also use as a guide. But these folks are also family. So I'm encouraging them to also ask each other questions as we move forward, or ask for, can you highlight that? Can you take us a little bit deeper? Because there are folks watching from all across the country who are, really interested in how do we continue to make progress in this time. Now, we've all seen on the federal level that Justice 40 was ended. We understand that, and we thank everyone who poured all that work into it, and we will make sure that the next time that it's even stronger and deeper and better. We also know that there have been some cuts that have happened. We've seen environmental justice staff on the federal level. Some have been let go, some have been reassigned. We also know that there have been a number of positive things that are still happening that sometimes doesn't get the attention. CEQ over at NEPA, that phase 2 is still on the books. talking about cumulative impacts. When we look at Title VI, you know, it's still there. We just have to figure out the best utilization of that. But I like when we go down to the state level and the local level where the work is really happening. On the state level, both New Jersey and New York are moving forward on their cumulative impacts and EJ siting laws. So for all the folks who have been pouring into that space, that's incredibly important because we understand that our communities have been carrying those burdens upon burdens upon burdens, and we have to be able to have that as a part of the analysis. When you look over at Minnesota, Minnesota is also moving forward on cumulative impacts and rulemaking under new law that they have on the books. And then, of course, over in California, if we go to the other side of the country around AB 617, that's a part of that CAP program that's out there. They're looking at innovative ways of cutting local air toxics, and we know the burden that's going on there. So those are things that are on the state level, but even when we go down to the local level, you can look at places like Phoenix, which understands because of the climate impacts that are going on, the temperatures continue to rise and rise and rise, and they are now doing some cities building heat justice work that's going on around their infrastructure. And even in Chicago, they are also looking at some of these impacts that are going on and are thinking critically about how to make the additional investments. And those are just a quick snapshot of what folks are doing sort of from the legislative side of the equation. But we're also going to be able to talk tonight about how folks are making change on the ground from frontline organizations and others. And of course, there are tribal representatives who are also moving and making positive change. So with that being said, I want to now take it to the folks who know what they're talking about. They know how to make moves. And I'm going to start with my good friend who I've known a long, long time, Dr. Nataki Osborne-Jelks. Dr. Jelks, I'm going to come to you. And if you could just share with folks a little bit about the work that you do, especially, you know, over the last year or a couple of years, and how it has played a critical role in helping us to continue to move the needle forward.
Well, thank you so much, Mustafa. I just knew you were going to go to somebody else for the first statement. But thank you for the acknowledgement and for bringing me into the conversation. It's a pleasure to be here with all of these amazing freedom fighters and EJ advocates and activists. It really is an honor to be here with all of you all. So to talk a little bit about the work that I've been engaged in, let me just say that, and thank you, Adrienne, Dr. Hollis, for the very heartfelt introduction. Let me just give you a little bit of context about some of my work in the Atlanta area. I'm one of the co-founders of the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, otherwise known as WAWA. And Dr. Hollis mentioned WAWA. We are a community-based organization that has been working on the ground for a couple of decades to advance water justice and equity in Atlanta, particularly working on the west side of the city, where many years ago we found that our communities were not being our voices weren't heard at environmental decision-making tables. And in the mid 1990s, early to mid 1990s, the city of Atlanta was actually trying to or making plans to put a mini wastewater treatment plant into a community park without the engagement of our community. And when many of our elders found out about that, they began to organize and to mobilize and also to conduct research to find out how other cities were dealing with some of the wastewater challenges that the city of Atlanta was faced with. And once they did that research, they came up with what I like to call sort of a community or citizens, solution to the problem, and they tried to advance that solution. And they were met with some resistance at the city level, but they persevered and ultimately were able to get the city to abandon its plans after it had already invested dollars in designing their solution. They abandoned that and went with separating the sewer system so that essentially we would not be faced with having raw, untreated sewage mixed with stormwater flowing through our creeks and streams, which flow through the front yards, backyards, school grounds, and public parks in our communities. After that, our elders were also able to forced the city to abandon a plan to build an 8-mile sewage tunnel from the north side to the south side of the city. They looked at what was happening with some of these underground sewage tunnels in other places and saw that they were fractured and cracking and water resources were being contaminated. And ultimately, they were able to push for that plan to be abandoned. And really on the heels of that work, there were some of us who decided that we needed to have an organization in place that would not only fight against some of these negative projects, but that would also put forward a positive vision for what the west side of the city could be. And so Wawa was born from those efforts. And since our founding, we've been doing a lot of that same work, trying to advance community science solutions to some of the problems that our communities face. We have been trying to make sure that these voices that have been left out get a seat at the table. And in some cases, we have created our own tables and invite some of the city and municipal folks and, feds and state folks to those tables as well to make sure that they are communicating effectively and authentically with communities. And that, the communities are at the center of some of the solutions that we need to see for our infrastructure needs. It largely has taken on kind of water has been sort of that galvanizing force, but we understand that everything happens in the watershed. So we can't dismiss what happens on the land. We can't dismiss what happens in the air. And so that has brought us into working on a multitude of environmental challenges as they impact communities and residents on the west side of the city. Other things that I'll just briefly mention is that our audience is pre-K to gray. So we engage with our babies all the way up to our elders. Anything from, place-based related research, place-based environmental education, intergenerational dialogues and learning. We see all of those things as a part of the solution to the challenges that our communities face. And we also believe that our communities have the right to environmental self-determination. So in terms of the changes that we want to see, the solutions that we want to see to address the issues that our communities face, we have a right to call out what those solutions should be. And we also have a right to help to diagnose what those problems are so that we are looking at those problems in the most robust way possible to come up with those solutions. And that's the work that we've been doing for over 2 decades. We, lean so much on our elders and many of our ancestors who have gone on to a higher plane, but we continue to bring their spirits into our work to advance. Water equity and justice on the west side of the city. I'll stop there so that we can move on to someone else. And thank you again for the opportunity to engage this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne-Jelks. We appreciate you. And now I'm going to go to Diane Dillon Ridgely. Let me say that again. I'm going to Diane Dillon Ridgely. Let me pass the mic to you.
Well, thank you, Mustafa. Mustafa knows me well enough to know I'm not going to do it exactly the way he slayed it out because that's just how I do it. But also, I couldn't start, and Monica knows me well from our previous meetings as well. I can't just jump in with the activities without dealing with the people and the context of this moment that we're in. And, when you were going through and listing Phoenix and you were talking about the person in Phoenix, the temperature monitoring, I turn on PBS and there's the people from Phoenix working with Dr. Nataki because they've both been monitoring the air to show and demonstrate that when you take the temperatures and you have urban cool zones, as opposed to what's been going on in too many neighborhoods of people who are words vulnerable. Anyway, you get the idea. Each of us could give a list as long as our arms of projects and work that we've done. But next time Adrienne introduces me, she's going to say something other than the fact that I'm just old because I've done it for 40. I know you didn't say that. I'm just teasing you because I have to be a little bit light. But I want to make the connection to the first People of Color Summit. I actually wasn't at the summit because I was assigned to be in Miami at the World Women's Congress for a Healthy Planet, which was going on at the same time. And it was, the best way to describe it was, it was 1,500 women and good non-women from 83 countries who came together because we were leading in the next year to the Earth Summit in 1992. And I spent several hours this past weekend going over some of the papers and some of the pieces that were produced from that. Some that we worked at the World Bank when I was the chair a couple of times at CL, which is the Center for International Environmental Law. Much of my work has been inside particular activist organizations and institutions, including 10 years on the NWF board and working with National Wildlife Federation and others. But I'm not saying that to talk about me as an individual, but rather we have had wonderful partnerships that have supported us. I remember both of my grandmothers were incredibly active all throughout the 30s and the 40s. And my maternal grandmother had George Washington Carver even as her faculty advisor when she was a student at Tuskegee and graduated in 1919. So I sometimes think it's really important to let young people know, especially, you know, if you're young enough and you're in this moment, and let's be frank, I am not being political, I'm just being honest. The amount of discord and deliberate destabilization that has gone on in this last year is more than just daunting. And if we aren't careful, there are young people or people who maybe haven't been so engaged because the titles of what they've been working on hasn't been connected to the rest of what we put in the environmental justice rubric. So they might think this is either all of a sudden happening or it's the worst ever. It has been worse. It is, but you must understand that we come from a legacy of people who have, you know, we mentioned John Red Cloud and your children, the seventh generation. I'm at least a fifth generation Texan, a native Texan, been in Iowa now for 45 years. But people have been on duty and working for a long time. And I hope Monica doesn't mind if I mention she just buried her mother on Friday, and she was a veteran, you know, what she did. And I hope you will take some time to explain to everyone what she did in the Vietnam War and what she did as a veteran actor and her levels of activism. You know, we come from people who perhaps have been forced to, but who have embraced that responsibility. Our assignment has been to take and make our country whole, to heal it, HEAL. And if we look and realize that this past weekend, I had a report that I got today, over 20,000 different communities in this country had some form of activism. I'm not going to call it protest. I'm saying people came out and they met people in their neighborhoods and in their communities. Some of them didn't know them before. Some of them just got to meet them. I mean, I have a special young man, Levi, who in Plainfield, Virginia, is 6 years old. This was his first activism. And he was out and he was talking about peace. He was talking about how we're going to make communities healthy for everyone. If we could fail if we didn't in this moment remember, acknowledge, and focus on what we have to do in order to make sure we hold on to, because this country has yet to be, and I think about one of my favorite poems from Langston Hughes, Let America Be America Again, the country that has not been yet, but must be. And we have been the people who are going to make it. I was fortunate enough to hear him at his last reading before he passed away. But I don't want to go on too long. I just wanted to say that the context, Dolores Herrera, I was listening to Dolores Herrera just yesterday. She said, when people get to about 3% of the population, And 8 million is more than 3% of our population. People can understand and know and see whatever misinformation may be putting out by somebody else. And I'm not going to name anybody because I don't need to. People can see each other, people in communities. And I think that's the point of our talking about what's going on in your communities. But we must not ever think that we are isolated or that we are alone or we are estranged, because we have a legacy behind us of years. We have people who have our heart now, and there's some who don't. But you know what? Eventually, everyone is going to have to deal with this, because we have, I don't want to say scorched our earth, we have neglected. I've been saying for 30 years, it's time to mother earth. That's a verb. We wax eloquent for years, how wonderful it is, and Mother Earth, this and everything else. Now it's time for us to step up and Mother Earth. And before Mustafa pulls me off, I had 2 short quotes. I want to start. One is from Franklin Roosevelt, FDR. Now, he passed away in 1945, so he didn't write this yesterday. This is what he was reminding us. We must constantly be vigilant against the attacks of intolerance and injustice. We must scrupulously guard the civil rights and civil liberties of all of our citizens, of all of our communities, whatever their background. We must remember that any oppression, any injustice, any hatred is a wedge designed to attack civilization. And the last few sentences, Maya Angelou, in her poem that she wrote on the Pulse of Morning, that she wrote for the inauguration in 1992, there are 4 sentences. Lift up your faces. You have a piercing need for this bright morning dawning for you. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. And if faced with courage, we need not live it again. Lift up your eyes upon the day breaking before you. Give birth again to the dream. Now, I was going to say that at the end, but I said it at the beginning, because we must remember we have to hold each other up. And if you get too tired, it's okay. Take some rest. Nourish yourself. Stay engaged. This is a long, long haul, but it is ours. We are built for it. We are more than enough. We've been paid for over and over again. Back to you, dear Mustafa.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. I love you. And thank you for those words. John, I want to come to you. The first principle of environmental justice is about honoring Mother Earth. I know that is, the root that runs deep in the work that you do. Could you talk a little bit about the work that you're focusing on and why it's so incredibly important?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's a real honor to sit here and listen and join the conversation and provide a bit of perspective. I come from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. We have about 2 million acres of land out there, 35,000 tribal members. But again, our voice, from coast to coast, from Alaska down to the tip of Florida, there are about 2 million Native folks in this country, 574 tribes. And even across, international borders, there's a lot of Canadian Indigenous communities. There's a lot of Indigenous communities in what is modern day Mexico, across the political boundaries. And our work in Pine Ridge is focused on, as one of my friends put it, it's like teaching the folks how to kind of fish instead of just giving them the fish. What we do is we equip them with the skills necessary to install solar, be on the forefront of what we think is a clean energy movement in this country. And our training program at the Red Cloud Renewable Energy Center in Pine Ridge is, I would say, a one of a kind and first of a kind. And I say that generally those are positive accolades, but in this case, as a first of a kind renewable energy training center on a Native American reservation and one of a kind, those are not so great. Those are things we'd like to change going forward. We like other tribes, other indigenous communities to take the torch and replicate the program because of how important it is. There are 574 tribes, and I would say a handful can really define energy sovereignty for themselves, and it does look different. Some tribes are developing coal, maybe they can drill for oil, but a lot of our lands don't have those, but the sun does shine, and the wind blows on all reservation lands everywhere. So it's harnessing it responsibly. And I think that's an important part of what our movement is we do what's we call creating solar warriors. We equip these people with the skills necessary to get out there and normalize deployment. Energy sovereignty looks like how people kind of define it. Rooftop solar, perhaps, and we're trying to help folks in this tribal self-determination. As of right now, I found it's really interesting. Ever since January 20th, there's been almost an assault, if you will, on clean energy, on the industry, seismic shift in Washington. And I've noticed on some of the conferences that I've attended, symposia, summits, that tribal folks, indigenous folks that are at least federally recognized are beginning to look around and ask each other, like, what does it mean to assert our sovereignty? What does that look like in a responsible way? There's a different path, because we go around the state boundaries and we have this direct relationship with the federal government. So tribes and indigenous folks are beginning to ask not only like questions, but the right questions on how to assert sovereignty and what that looks like. So for our work, I'm just really grateful that there continues to be half this country that believes in clean energy, that believes in climate change, that understands and appreciates the work that this group here is undertaking every day. Warriors in your own right, clean energy champions, whether it's for water, whether it's for the rights of your community, and other native folks, people are starting to ask questions. And for us, I think our happy place is really just, being that beacon of hope in a place like Pine Ridge. I don't know if anybody's ever been through South Dakota, but it's a very rural, geographically isolated place. Lots of tough realities there, socioeconomic things kind of going on. But if you can look past that pervasive poverty and some of those other social ills, you see a real beautiful culture. There's language that's vibrant, there's heritage, there's pageantry, there's culture, there's ceremony. All these things were very, very wealthy. Median household incomes, maybe not, but you know what? We're retaining that identity that was, for years, there was a state-sponsored effort to tamp it down, but we've been resilient. And today we're just glad to be really occupying a space. And we still believe that no matter who occupies 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the world still needs our work product. So I'm just glad to be here. I'm glad to be part of this group, glad to share a little bit more of what I do, and glad to encourage folks to reach out to our website and share redcloudrenewable.org. We're doing some pretty neat stuff, and glad to be, again, it's a real honor to be part of EJAC. It was a really great time we had in Reno a couple years back. Still remember that time, such a beautiful place, and being involved with everyone, had a nice dinner. And anyhow, thank you again, Mustafa, for the opportunity to speak, and glad to be here. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you for also bringing into this space. We can create new economic opportunities, and at the same time, we can protect culture. We can make sure that we address the wealth gap that exists in many locations across our country. We can make sure that we're addressing the climate crisis. There are so many positives that all the folks on this screen are contributing to, and so many others across the country. And that's why we need to make sure that we continue down this path in a respectful way, but in a way that continues the momentum that is so incredibly needed. And speaking about momentum, I'm going to go to Miss Monica Lewis Patrick, because the momentum that she has been able to create from the first day that I know that she was doing the work to today is amazing. So Miss Monica, as I often call you, I want to pass the mic to you so you can bless folks with a few words.
Thank you so much. Peace and blessings to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Just very grateful to be on the call. The EJAC has been really a North Star in terms of the work that's happening nationally. And the self-determination and the cooperative work is definitely evidenced among many of these leaders and the work that they're doing and have been doing for decades now for many of us. But where we are right now, I would say for my organization, We the People of Detroit, I have the honor and privilege of serving as the president and CEO, one of the co-founders, the 5 women that actually founded the organization. And the organization was really founded out of self-determination and cooperative work around making sure that families were not losing their children because they could not afford their water. There are policies in Michigan that if you don't have running water for 72 hours, your children can be taken. The only place that we saw these very draconian policies enacted were in places like Detroit and Flint. The fear factor, I cannot explain it. So part of what we had to do is roll up our sleeves. And as one of our elders says, we had to deputize ourselves. We couldn't wait on anyone to save us or rescue us. We had to understand that among all of us, as one of our elders had said, all of you have been to the academy. You all have been educated. Every woman had a degree or several. And we began to organize ourselves. Out of that work came the Community Research Collective. We actually authored a book that sits in the Library of Congress called Mapping the Water Crisis, the Dismantlement of African American Neighborhoods in Detroit. That book was recently used at Harvard University in one of their classes to talk about this disparity, but to also be able to give context to the fact that for the last 50 years, the American government has divested from water. So when we don't put it within that context, it gets isolated to these very independent municipal responses when it really needs a national response. We also played a critical role in being able to tie bar that there's a public health component to not being able to afford and access water that's clean, safe, and affordable. And so with that, we were able to produce a piece of research with Dr. Nadia Gaber looking at water insecurity and the psychosocial impacts. So once again, as Dr. Nataki talked about, this is where citizen science, so not waiting for the academy to tell us what the issues are, but really using community-centered genius to be able to build the necessary relationships between the technical experts and the community genius to be able to get the solutions and systemic change we need and deserve. Most recently, what we have been able to do is we found that we could not just stop and start with advocacy, where we had to build out in terms of technology and innovation. And so for the past 10 years, we've invested in youth leadership development. We were deeply inspired by the work that was happening with Dr. Nataki and Wawa. And so we were able to partner with our youth and come together. And so now We the Youth of Detroit has partnered with Stanford University, UCLA, UC Berkeley, also the University of Michigan and Michigan State, because what they're working on is developing a game that simulates the conditions of not having the water that you need and all of the possibilities of why that is a person's condition. Because what we found is that the terms of even around water being a human right gets very bifurcated and politicized and racialized. And so how do we build beyond those divides? And so our young people have come up with this amazing game that we are going to create into a board game and a virtual game that will allow us to move these conversations even further. Another project we're working on with Stanford and UCLA is to do water testing and to pair that with GIS mapping so that our young people have more skills that they're bringing into these conversations so that they understand what is happening, but they also are the communicators and translators to our older members of our community so that we're building power together. And so with that, they're laying over top of that cultural work, animation. So all of this is about skill building and making our community members the experts in their own crisis. And then the third thing I would say is the work that we're doing around not only the mapping, but then we're doing work on policy that is building and investing in creating ambassadors. So ambassadors at a local, state, and federal level. And some of that work is deeply supported by the National Wildlife Federation and the partnership that we have with the University of Michigan's Law School with O'Day Saline. And so with that, we've been able to really author a template of water affordability for state policy that we believe is on path to be actualized. And so we just recently introduced House Bill 4555 that is a critical part of preventing water shutoffs. We know that if we don't stop water from being shut off, it's actually going to be weaponized to be able to gentrify more communities, to extract more property, to dilute home ownership of people of color and low-income persons. We're also deeply concerned about data centers and what this will mean in terms of water quality, water access, water availability, water affordability. So once again, I've said, we're not waiting on anyone to rescue us. We are inviting all persons of goodwill that have abilities, expertise, talents, even things that are more cultural and artsy, to be able to work collectively to make sure that we're telling a story that is explaining a condition that is helping us all come to the table to build collective power. So I'll stop there, but thank you so much for my time.
I don't know if the folks in the chat gonna let you stop because they fired up. As Dr. McLean says, fired up and ready to go. We appreciate you, Miss Monica, so much for dropping that wisdom on us. I know as we unpack, you'll go deeper and deeper. So I also want to bring into our conversation now my good friend, Reverend Leo Woodbury. I always say when I think about Rev, he's like, don't talk about it, be about it. So Reverend Leo Woodbury, can I pass the mic to you?
Yes. Thank you so much, my friend. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first, I am honored and privileged to be in the presence of such great change makers and leaders and just, lovers of justice. And so, we began New Alpha Community Development Corporation in 2015, received our 501c3 in 2016. And so from the very beginning, we, as you said, we're focused on solutions on the grassroots level, but just like a seed that flourishes and grows, we also believe in partnering with other organizations, not only in South Carolina, but regionally, nationally. And we've had a few opportunities to do it internationally with groups in Africa. So the very first thing we did in 2016 when we received 501c3 was to come together with groups from Mississippi, South Carolina, and Virginia, and Georgia. And we actually came together, 6 organizations, to do training on solar installation, with the agreement being that each participant from each state would also go back home and act as the trainers for other EJ organizations. So we wound up doing 7 trainings in 4 states, and had people who could go to work for solar farm companies, etc. But we, our approach is that we start on the grassroots level, but then we replicate from there the work that we're doing. So our approach is demonstration, and then after demonstration, replication, and after replication, then amplification. So a good example of that was when we were working with the Chisholm Legacy Project and National Wildlife Federation, and we were using hydro panels, first at the church where I'm blessed, the pastor Kingdom Living Temple, and those hydro panels actually draw in air, heated up with the thermal unit. The condensed water is stored and then pumped out. So at the church, we used it for drinking water. And then at our EJ Training Center in Britton's Neck, South Carolina, where we have a 2,600 square foot building on 7.5 acres of wetland property, we use that as a drip water irrigation system to water the garden that we have at the training center. And then working with NWF and the Chisholm Legacy Project, we were able to amplify it and also have hydro panels placed in individuals' homes in Jackson, Mississippi, as well as 21 panels in Sand Branch, Texas, a Freedmen community. So we have worked on a lot of water issues, from training people to test well water after floods. We're now working also with students from Limestone College, which just shut down. Students working on their Masters of Social Work to teach people how to test their waters for PFAS in Britain's Neck, South Carolina, as well as in Effingham, South Carolina. We've also planted 1,000 trees after mapping out the area in the community of Britain's Neck, where we're hoping to build a model community, as well as planted 100 trees in the city of Florence. So we start on that level, but then we also level up. So we serve on the City of Florence's Sustainability Advisory Committee. We also serve on the South Carolina regulatory staff, which houses the Office of Energy, and have contributed both to the energy plan for the state of South Carolina, as well as the EV plan for the state of South Carolina. And we're currently installing EV charging stations at churches in order to avoid situations like the digital divide. I started to build infrastructure in communities, so as the vehicles become more affordable, we don't lack the infrastructure in our communities, but instead have to drive long distances just to charge up the vehicles that we have. So we work with technology, we work with training, and there's so much we have. We actually have an online produce market where we work with Black farmers to provide produce through our Imani market, where people can come on and order produce. We're actually now getting ready to, from the Dixon Farms in Ana, South Carolina, distribute food from the sweet potatoes that they're currently harvesting. And we work with the PD tribe, the indigenous tribe for the PD region of South Carolina. And in the last 30 days, we've distributed 40,000 pounds of potatoes, 14,000 pounds of grapes. And Saturday, I know we just had another 40,000 pounds of bananas and squash that we're distributing. And we're hoping that both that approach of providing free, healthy produce, as well as having the Imani market, will help us to break the false narrative about food deserts, which only exist because we're relying on corporations to do what we can do for ourselves. So if some of us who are old enough, we remember when the produce person came through the neighborhood with a truckload of fresh produce or fish, or the quilt man came through. So realizing that if we do for self, that we won't have to deal with false narratives that harm our communities, we're working on that. The other thing is that 3 miles from our EJ Training Center for Resiliency and Sustainability, we were blessed last year to purchase 305 acres of wetland, old growth forest that used to be the Woodbury Plantation. It had 5 oxbow lakes on there, as well as a mile of riverfront property that we are working on establishing hiking trails, birding trails, camping areas, as well as an eco lodge and space for research in this historical Black community that goes back beyond the creation of the United States of America. I know that is a lot, but we are really looking forward to doing more work like that. We work with the PD Indian, the indigenous people. They tell me they don't get insulted if I say Indian. They said that's what they said. But we helped them to get 91 acres of land. And next year we will be announcing a land grant program in rural African American and indigenous communities, because land is the source of production and power. And we are, last but not least, working on establishing and expanding a donor plan, so that, as my father once told me, who only went to the 5th grade because he had to drop out of school to run the family farm, we want to build out a plan and a system so that we can fund our own freedom and not just rely on grants and other things. And we're looking to do that by creating social enterprises for nonprofits, so that we are working from a position of what we call environomics, the nexus where the environment and economic development meets for our community. So I'm going to stop there because I want to hear some of the other amazing folks in the work that they're doing, and just close by saying this. This is our opportunity to close ranks. This is our opportunity to do what we did during Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction, when there weren't a lot of grants, there wasn't federal support, but we were able to create universities, colleges, hotels, bus lines, so many amazing things. We can do it. All we have to do is work together and just plan together and realize that it is community-led solutions that change the world. Thank you so much. Mhm.
Appreciate that, Rev. You're dropping some knowledge on folks. So y'all are doing amazing, right? Quick time check. We're almost at 7 o'clock. We got about 60 minutes left to go forward. Folks are throwing up hearts on the screen. I know y'all doing your job, because I actually got people emailing me talking about how much they enjoy what you're doing. So not only are you getting it through the chat, but folks is actually taking time to actually type messages out about how much they are valuing what's going on. And that James Baldwin quote at the beginning, so many people just actually don't know about this amazing work that's going on. So I hope there are funders and other people who are watching this and listening to this incredible information, so that we can make sure that it continues to expand. With that being said, I'm going to ask all the folks we have on our screen to be concise as we move through this next part of the question and answers, so that we can make sure that we get to not only the ones that people submitted, but also what's coming through with folks who are watching and through the chat. And with that being said, we started out, a couple of folks talked a little bit about that first People of Color Summit. It's important to make sure that we have the foundation as we're moving forward. A number of you who are on the screen either were there or you've watched the evolution of environmental justice over the years. Diane, I'm going to come to you first. I'm going to ask you also to be concise along with all the other folks. And as we're addressing this, can you talk a little bit about, because you have worked in both the nonprofit world, you've worked, of course, with conservation organizations, you've done work on the business side of the equation. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen over the years in relation to this issue and how you've seen it grow?
Yes. I'm gonna answer your question, and I hope the notes that I wrote work to do it in a concise way, because there've been key people. But I think one of the things I hope you people are picking up from John Red Cloud, from the Rev, from Monica, from Nataki and Adrienne, there are key people. But I think one of the things that we've done in the last 40, 50 years is we've learned that, I don't want to make it sound negative, that it's easy to say so-and-so is the one, the Messiah, the it. And I hope we recall and hold on to the fact that our power resides in the collective of us. Yes, it's important for us individually to do all that, but it is as we are collectively working together. And if you haven't, I've been trying to listen to each one of the presentations, and pull out of them. I saw Crystal Jennings, and I have to shout out because the last 3 times I was on something with her, I didn't. She's done some fabulous work with education, both for NWF and in the Atlanta area. So I got my check there. But this past week, the Nobel Committee in Norway, announced the 2025 Nobel Prize recipient. I don't say winner; it's recipient. And I had to think back to 2004, I'm sorry, when Wangari Maathai, who was a colleague and friend of mine in Kenya, was the first Black woman, African female, to be a recipient of the Nobel Prize. And what she did in her speech, as well as what she did in her work, aside from starting the Greenbelt movement and really focusing on trees. And people said, because women needed money. She initially was going to talk about, women in the upper echelons of the academy. And the women said, but we need some money right now. And we need to feed our children right now. And we know what to do right now. And they said, but maybe we don't have the technology. She said, I don't think we need technology. Rev, it's almost as if you were mainstreaming what Wangari said. She said, I think we have all the technology we need in order to be able to create cash producing conditions for our communities and to be self-reliant and resilient. But go back and read her Nobel speech. In it, she said, this Nobel Prize is yours. And I think, to answer your question, Mustafa, in the last 40, 50 years, from when I represented and helped to organize on Howard's campus as a student for the very first Earth Day, I don't mean the first time Black people or people of color, for the first Earth Day, when Dennis Hayes was putting all of that organization across the country, it was clear to me that we had to do several things. First of all, it's too easy and too quick that we make vertical, hierarchical structures, and we put somebody up at the top, and then everybody has to fall in rank underneath it. I remember my grandfather went to the same med school as Adrienne did, Meharry. He finished in 1917. And I remember in reading his notebooks, he said one of the mistakes that we made, because he was, to my research, the first Black oncological surgeon in his country. He said, we need to turn these vertical structures on their sides, and you make continuums. When you have only the surgeon at the top who cuts something out, you've narrowed the capacity for the community to deal with whatever it is. When you put it on the side, suddenly the person who teaches you exercise, the person who teaches you nutrition, the person who supports you, along with the nurse, the EMT, you have the continuum, which then lets everyone be part of the process. We've had so much of our educational system, and I think Red Cloud, you could speak to some of this too, where it was miseducation as much as it was education, that had made us always think we had to be in silos. But what we've learned and what has happened with environmental justice, we've learned that what we were looking at as toxins coming to our water shores, our banks and our shores and our rivers and our waters impacted our health. That health led to higher rates of cancer. And I won't go on, I promise, but you can see how it gets built and you lose the context. Healthy communities, and that's why I'm so careful about the words I try and use. Healing is what we need to do in terms of our communities. Our collective actions are what we do. And then that allows us to then make policies and make legislation that actually works to take care of people. We got enough food. We have enough resources, at least. Now we got to make sure, instead of making more trans fats or high fructose corn syrup, we need to have nutritious food, and we need to make sure it's available in communities. Instead of making hurdles for people, we need to make access for people. And I want to talk about something else, but I'm not going to, because it takes too long sometimes to explain things. But each one of these times we have a webinar and we do these conversations, we help to expand the ideas. I mean, there have been so many people like William Monroe Trotter and some others. I'm bursting with, having been in communication with some of them, because I feel like some days like I am that old, but also Fannie Lou Hamer. I mean, I'll still say what she said. She said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. We continue to put together what it is we have to address. And somebody else comes in, be very careful. Be wary of the person who comes in telling you what you don't know, telling you what you can't do. We can do whatever we need to do to take care of ourselves, because we always have.
Appreciate that. Thank you for dropping
Monica's
that.
shaking her head, so I'm going to stop. That tells me that's time to stop.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We appreciate that. I want to transition a little bit here to policy, because policy plays a role. Monica, I'm going to come to you first. So as we're thinking about policy wins, and I know that you have been a part of many of those conversations and the work, can you talk about what you've seen that is working and what we continue to need to do in this moment?
Yeah, I think there's been an evolution in terms of how we've had to approach the work in places like Detroit. We still move a lot by paper flyers, church networks, uh, uh, sororities and fraternities. It's still very traditional. But then what we find too, in order to be able to advance the work beyond that neighborhood, local level, that we needed more technology. We needed to be able to be quick in our responses, to be able to do some of this work in real time. So I really appreciate the work that has happened intergenerationally in terms of our young people using their gifts of technology and being able to build out websites and create phone trees that are tech-based and things of that nature. It's accelerated the work. I think also art and culture has played a critical role in making sure that these very complicated issues are digestible and they're able to be translatable. And then the work that is actually replicatable, because that's the other piece. There are tactics that we used during the civil rights movement that are no longer effective. It is not smart to fill up a jail. It is not tactically in the best interest to block a highway. Some of those things that weren't as risky now carry federal charges and the possibility of being deported to some unknown location. So we're actually being able to talk to our babies about how to do this work smart, how to be able to use art culture, how to be able to use the expansiveness of their vocabulary, how to be able to use technology. Some of the work that we did was just around GIS mapping, being able to show where public health impacts were happening, being able to refute the mayor and the governor when they said things like water shutoffs were not creating a spread of COVID-19. Well, we know that everybody was challenged to wash their hands and properly sanitize. But when you can show data laid over top of where residents are residing and it correlates with where water shutoffs have happened, then it makes it more difficult for them to continue to ignore you or to refute you. The other things that we've been able to do is that our music and media maker folks were able to go into communities where maybe they're not going to read your report, your 5-page research paper or your white paper. They're not going to listen to your webinar, but they will listen to spoken word, or they will listen to their local hip hop artist talk about the fact that he's down with the fact that Mama Monica and her team are working on water justice and water liberation. And so being able to get 5 minutes with a crowd that may not traditionally come to my meeting, care a lot about the science, they will listen to this hip hop artist validate the work that we do. And then the last thing I'll say is our babies. Being able to cross pollinate with issues that may not be directly about a water disparity. Some of the work we were able to do was with, like, Dr. Alicia Ferris out of Toledo, with Toledo Junction, also with Brenda Coley and Milwaukee Water Commons. Also, my brother Mike Harris out of Flint with the Flint Water Lab. We were able to teach our babies how to do water testing, water capturing. We were able to work on just water recreation. Over 70% of African Americans don't swim. And that's because of water disparity. water disenfranchisement and a lack of accessibility. But being able to introduce our babies to water recreation, it actually makes them fall in love with water and become water protectors that we don't have to undo around water policies. And so some of that work had to shift from us. So it couldn't just be about the fight. It had to be about moving from trauma to transformation. And that's where our young people were moving on this trajectory of being able to protect water, to be able to bring about more water technology and innovation, to be able to be a part of conversations around job creation, and to make sure that we were doing it in a way where we were investing in their vision for water, not just the vision that we had as their elders for water.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Dr. Nataki Osborne-Jelks, can I come to you with the same question around policy?
Sure, and I can't remember exactly what the full question was, but what I will say in terms of policy for us, it's definitely been about collaboration. Working with a coalition of organizations to try to move policy at the state level. Now, I'm coming from Georgia, so when you talk about the state legislature, we know what we're dealing with. It's oftentimes really an uphill battle. But we continue to go back and we continue to try to move the agenda forward, even if we're just inching along, because we know at some point we'll hit that kind of perfect moment in which we'll be able to kind of push things through. But for us in Georgia, really some of that conversation has been around just really acknowledging what environmental justice is. At the state agency level, we haven't had any real acknowledgement of environmental justice, no staff people working on environmental justice issues. We definitely have like a hazardous sites inventory list and things like that at the state level, but no real acknowledgement that there are some communities who are disproportionately impacted. So that's a conversation that we continue to try to push forward at the state level. When you talk about cumulative impacts, that is, closely following that conversation really around just acknowledging the environmental injustice that's happening and using cumulative impacts as a way to talk about, some of those issues. So lots of groups are kind of forming together. We've had for a couple of years, an Environmental Justice Day at the state capitol to really bring together lots of organizations from throughout the state to work on those issues. And then at the local level, it's also about this coalition building. It's about working with lots of different organizations. In terms of, some of the issues happening at the municipal level, we've seen a lot of turnover, and at the staff level, we're in an election year right now in terms of our city council and our mayor. And in some cases, there are some positions that are highly contested, others that are not. But we are continuing to build coalitions to work on issues. We're trying to, educate our decision makers, to bring them, to bring these issues to their attention. And in some cases, as we talk about like the water utility and things like that, we are trying to bring those entities, back into right relationship with the community. It is an uphill battle. There's been a lot of change that's happened, but we've developed some coalitions in which we are working on kind of a platform to really to try to develop, not only develop a relationship with new folks who are coming in to the utility, but to raise and to elevate, the key issues that our communities are facing. A lot to do with flooding. There's a lot to do with stormwater infrastructure and the lack thereof, I should say. We have a lot of aged and old infrastructure in the city, and when it breaks down, our communities are the ones who are hit first and worst. And so we're really trying to push that through. I want to highlight also a local coalition that has come out of our work. It's called the Stop Flooding Us Coalition, that is working to really elevate issues around flooding in particular, and to really try to push the city to be a little bit more proactive in terms of developing comprehensive plans to address our stormwater issues. It also kind of seems like kind of an uphill battle, but through this coalition work and quite honestly, through collaboration with groups outside of the state, the Water Hub, our Uplift, is really helping us with communications, with, getting things out, on social media channels, helping us to set up appointments with local reporters who are, considering, addressing some of the work that we're doing, in their stories. And so all of that is kind of what we're trying to do, really, any and everything. We're throwing it up against the wall, seeing what will stick. In terms of that outreach. But the coalition building and the collective, that's been said before by others, but I want to emphasize that that is the way that we're, even, getting an audience to really to listen to the critical issues that we need to have need to have addressed, excuse me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. John, I want to come to you also because with sovereignty and policy, sometimes folks don't understand how that has to be navigated. Can you talk about your sets of experiences, maybe some of the things you would like to see happen moving forward?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. I think it's very similar to some of the other marginalized communities that are out there. Tribal nations again have this very unique status with the federal government, but something that we have started to really take a concerted look at are tribal benefit agreements, much like a community benefit agreement, where folks who are, part of these groups who wish to enact and affect, positive impact in their community can start to work with listen to some of the tribal elders, some of the people that are really community engaged, people who are at the grassroots level, people who have been living in communities who have seen the changes and who have seen years of stagnation, who can speak to those things and really listen to the community and try to find out where they're at, take a pulse of what's going on. And, if it's possible, it's also well worth the effort to reach out to some of the local tribal leadership. At least where we're from, we have 35,000 tribal members. So there's a good sized council that's there. And in order to affect these policy changes, and I know it's a bit different at the tribal level because of that sovereignty that does exist. A tribe can have very different laws, bylaws, compared to the state that's immediately around it. And it's really kind of a unique thing. But starting with a community benefit agreement or tribal benefit agreement will really help drive a conversation to move forward to enact and codify policy changes. But again, I think it does require quite a bit of an invested leadership and those who are willing to listen to some of the counter arguments and not just shut them down because I'm in power, but like really understand there's some healthy discourse and it is appropriate to be able to listen and understand. And I think try to put yourself in the other's shoes. So for us, we're a 501c3, Red Cloud Renewable. So we have a very distinct position as a grassroots organization on the reservation, and we're not involved in the tribal politics side of things. But people come and they see what we're doing and they ask, how can we do this on my reservation? How can I do this where we're coming from? And a lot of it does require being able to weather kind of like the rough storm we're in now. I mean, we have a few more years, 3 years and some change to kind of weather this administration out, but also play the long game. That's what it's for, what they always say about Rome and all these other things. This is part of it. It's going to be rough together, but there's strength and there's solidarity in numbers. So just know that it's very, very, very temporary. But this policy piece, I would say, is a very, very important topic, and I'm glad to sit here and kind of listen in and hear some of the wisdom that's out there. Thank you, Mustafa. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you, John. Appreciate that. And thank you for reminding us about togetherness, because that's really where our strength lies in making sure that we stay connected. I want to transition a little bit, then we're going to get into some deeper conversations about new technologies and some of the things that are happening in the AI space and a couple of other things. But I would be remiss coming from a very small rural community if I didn't bring that also into our conversation. Reverend Woodbury, I'm going to come to you because there may be folks who are watching and asking themselves, what are some of the challenges that rural communities are facing? But also, you had mentioned earlier when you shared some information about how rural communities are also leading the way around some of the new business opportunities and a cleaner energy space. So could you, as succinctly as possible, talk a little bit about rural communities?
Sure. Thank you. Rural communities are really where we're losing a lot of our youth because there's really no engines of what we call engines of economic development. But then again, the assets that are in rural communities, land, forest, water, are things that if we can control, we can actually start to build, move, what you like to say, move communities from surviving to thriving. And so we've done some of that with technology like the hydro panel, training people for solar installation. But we also have done done surveys around flooding and heat, extreme heat, and have been able to use those surveys to create open source apps that people can put on their phones, their laptops, etc., so that when we're talking with policymakers, we're not just talking about feelings and generalization, but in the case of the Britain's Neck community, the people in the community can actually say, look, the flooding has impacted us to the point where 12% of the people surveyed feel they have health problems because of the mold that has grown in their homes from the flooding. And so we use those tools. We also partner with like the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the Northeast Conference, which is made up of 94 churches, with a youth department that helped us to plant the 1,000 trees. So those are some of the things we do. I just want to quickly say this, and it won't take long, Mustafa. In terms of policy, we have a systemic approach. We have a congressional briefing in January, state legislative day in February. We go to the COP to find out what's going on globally and use the information we gain from those three to educate people in the community in order to advocate and do direct action. And so technology is one way that we can create rural communities that are not only safe and healthier, but employ technology in order to move those communities deeper into the 21st century. And once again, as I said, that nexus of the environment and economic development can actually lift us from poverty as we build more resilient communities.
Mustafa, can I give a really quick example here?
Yes, ma'am.
Because this is where it gets a little harder. And many of us have been in rooms where you'll hear someone say, well, that's a racial justice issue, or this is just not part of the conservation issue. Oh, that's a social issue. And you're talking about that. And there's this tendency to divide things. And I want us to be always very careful that we listen well, because I'll say, I don't think always people are trying to be mean, but sometimes they are. And we have to find ways that we help them to get them through to see that, okay, you talk about forest policy. Well, forest policy doesn't seem to have anything to do with urban issues, or somebody else saying. Well, if you think about the fact that we still have 200 plus years of primarily financing public education through property taxes, what does that mean when you have an urban area where 75 to 80% of the people do not own the property in which they live? You have the percentage of people who rent versus the people who own has shifted so much. But many of our fundamental policy structures have changed so substantially, but we have not changed what I tend to call the legal architecture to meet what has changed in terms of the reality of how people live, those living patterns. So I want us to, it's too much to go into in this particular webinar, but we got to spend, as you said, some serious time looking at how we break those down so that people have tools to use as, I think, Monica, you called it community genius. Was that it? Community expertise, where we've done that analysis and what Reverend Woodbury is talking about and what John read, what Red Cloud, what you're talking about, where we have sessions where internally inside our organizations, but also then after that, how do we help take that information out to the communities? And my words would be pushed back on journalists and politicians who, for whatever reason, it's in their vested interest to keep it the status quo as it is. But that status quo is killing us in many instances. Iowa is now the #2 state of new cancer diagnoses. But, and I can go walk back through. One of the organizations I helped to found in 2014 was 100 Grannies for a Livable Future, because we understand that, back to it's time to Mother Earth, we can't keep just doing that over here and not realizing how it is creating, blocking, and literally killing us over here. And we have policies that people keep implementing. Well, that's just, that's a tax cut, or that's this. Well, that tax cut is my denial to have clean water. And so I just wanted to bring up, it's a very, very real part for us. It's not something we can talk about too quickly, but I feel we owe it to the elders and the children who are yet to come to say, we know that is a critical part of where environmental justice has to step up and help the society see where the shifts have occurred, but our policies have stayed the same, and it's literally hurting us and it's killing us. Thank you.
Yeah, Mustafa, can we build on what Ms. Diane just shared?
Yes.
There is a project that we're working with water experts across the nation called Water for Everybody. And the reason we came up with this as really a communications campaign is because we were running up against blockades from folks that were telling us either they did not perceive water as a human right, and therefore the conversation would just end there. You couldn't move any further. And so we spent time, even though we believe water is a human right, coming up with this campaign to say, how can we move the needle in the conversation so that we can find consensus? But if we can never have the conversation, how are we going to build consensus? So we came up with the 3 words, which is water for everybody. Nobody could argue against it. We then took it on the road and began to talk to folks in southern states, in out west, in Texas, more conservative communities. Guess what? We got past the part of saying water is a human right by just saying that water is for everybody. Now where we are is it doesn't change my value system around water being a human right and my belief, but it allows me to be able to hopefully inch them closer to believing that water is a human right. And then from that campaign, we came up with some cool swag. Well, who doesn't want cool swag? Okay. And so as we push this swag out, it's really leaning into a more hip hop, more modern culture of just embracing the swag. Well, if it becomes a cultural trend, well, we're all the better for it. Water for everybody. And then the conversations that we need to have on how to shift the policy, we've got an open door to make that happen. But it was something small. We put up $25,000 of our own money to begin to purchase the swag. It now is taking on a national appeal, and we have a couple of for-profit companies wanting to come to the table to join that effort. But this is some of the kind of things that we've learned from people at this table and others, that we don't wait for something good to happen to us. We could create every opportunity for that good to come to us.
I love that. Creating on-ramps so everyone knows that there's an opportunity for them to participate. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. As we go into the next conversation, let me ask Dr. Adrienne Hollis if there's some information she might like to share. There's also been folks who've been dropping information in the chat. So let me turn it over to you, Doc.
Thank you. I'm going to do a commercial break. Thank you for this. Oh, gosh, it's just such wonderful information, so needed. I wanted to draw your attention to not only the resources tab, down below. The team is working diligently to share information, but that if you sign up for our newsletter, of course, you'll get real-time information on, what's happening. We already have plans that our next CECC roundtable will be on the AI data centers that someone has already mentioned. And so that is where we'll be focusing our efforts in November, towards the end of November. So we wanted you to be aware of that. And we put the link to the newsletter in the resources so that you can sign up. It may also be in the chat, I think, so that you can sign up and get that real-time information. And one of the things that the Environmental Justice Program is doing, in addition to, just the great things that they're doing in there, is pivoting, given the things that are going on in this administration, to focus on state and local government, state and local action, right? Because that's where we see this administration is sort of pushing things. So, we're hearing some great work about your state and local involvement, and Rick Woodbury told us about his state legislator day in February. We'll be looking to participate in that in some way, attend that. And we also are still focusing on federal work. We're never going to stop doing that. And also just more community led work, community partnerships is an area that we are strengthening, even in the face of, I guess, the issues that we've been facing. As everybody probably knows, we lost our TICTAC, our technical assistance grant, as everybody else did, earlier this year. But we are still doing the work, still partnering. And so I just wanted to say those things for now, Mustafa. Thank you. But if we get a chance, I really would like to know what role everyone thinks that, large nonprofits and the type and the such can, what role can we play in this fight? In addition to what we're doing, what else do you think we should be doing?
Mm-hmm. Why don't I go to John first?
Thank you. With our work, we try to be on the leading edge of deploying renewable energy, clean energy on Indian reservations, indigenous communities. And we found there's been some bit of resistance from some of the local utilities. And it's really an interesting for us. I mean, we think that they complain about things like, grid resiliency and distribution and not generating enough power. And then we provide this solution, we think a results-based solution, and we come up upon this. I don't remember the novelist, but whoever it was saying it's hard to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. And it's really this thing that just kind of flies over our head. Like, how are we even listening to it? Like sometimes the words don't really compute for us. And so we start looking at ourselves and looking around and thinking like, okay, it seems like we've kind of collectively not lost our way, but maybe forgotten our instructions. And I don't know if it's intentionally, but just as people, as a community. One of the things that my dad talks about, when we're looking at this renewable energy, this source of power from the sun, is it's a new way to honor the old way. Our tribal, the people are people of the sun. There's this sun dance worship, and it's been going on for generations, for quite some time. And just embracing that new technology and honoring what has always been kind of there, that mainstay, that place, listening to those ancestors, trying to represent that and walk that prayer forward today. So for us, there's, it's a difficult to not want to go back to those days and want to pick up pick up a more, I don't know, forceful way of moving the policy forward, but understanding and trying to, I guess, see the way that the harms are being kind of done to the folks and on a large scale. And I think we're seeing this in some of the urban areas. I'm going to be going to Atlanta in December. So, we're having a staff retreat there. And part of it is a lot of our staff is coming from the reservation, but we want to go to another place and just kind of see how and just kind of drive around the community, and see how things are. So anyhow, I'm looking forward to widening the perspective and starting a new conversation. And I guess that's kind of my take on that. Thank you very much. Hopefully I answered the question.
They did. Thank you, John. So since you mentioned Atlanta, let me go to Dr. Osborne Jelks around, these larger organizations. We're one of them. There are a number of other medium and large size organizations. How should folks be showing up in relationship to environmental justice and clean energy opportunities?
Thank you for that question. I think these larger organizations need to stay the course, as true allies. I think that in the past, few years or so, we've come a long way in terms of some of those relationships, even to the point where National Wildlife Federation would have even applied, to have a tic tac. We're talking, major movement. And so even in this political context that we're in, it's about staying the course. It's about, being strategic. It's about sharing resources and power. And I know that resources are drying up. But to the extent possible, let's not forget, about the EJ organizations that, when times seemed like the resources seemed like they were going to be plentiful, there was all of this, conversation and interest and talk about collaboration. Let's continue that, even in the times that we're in now. It's just going to take the innovation. It's going to take us being as strategic as possible. But we keep talking about the collective. And so the power is in that collective. It's in the solidarity. It's in the unity. And so, it's really about staying the course and kind of doubling down, if you will. I mean, just the fact that we're having this conversation this evening is important because I know that, larger organizations have had to make some shifts in terms of, maybe not, kind of being, really out front, with things in terms of the language that they've been using, in terms of what's, on their websites and that sort of thing. But what I feel like is most important is that the spirit, of that collaboration has not gone away. And if those organizations can really just stay the course, I believe that this too shall pass in terms of this moment that we're in. And, if you abandon us now, we will remember, when this moment does pass. So, stay the course.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it is received. Reverend Woodbury.
Okay.
He's muted. Yeah, okay.
Okay. You can hear me now. Okay,
Yes, sir.
so several things. It's very important that we have large and medium-sized nonprofits working with people in the community. What we don't need is organizations that believe they can parachute into our communities with a plan of salvation. And then once they get a photo op and they help out with a few things that they want to do, then they motor out waving a flag of victory. What we need is large organizations and medium-sized organizations to provide the support and resources that communities say they need. So I have to give a shout out to National Wildlife Federation, who helped us to get the 1,000 trees we planted in the rural community of Britain's Neck and in the city of Florence, the 100 trees we planted there. I have to give a shout out to the Union of Concerned Scientists that funded the training that we did for 28 of their partners to teach them how to use AI in order to take paper and electronic surveys and convert them into open source apps. And I have to give a shout out to Dogwood Alliance that connected us to the anonymous donor that paid the $424,000 for us to purchase. And so we can do large nonprofits, medium-sized nonprofits have resources, have knowledge, have skills, and it is imperative while we are operating in the current landscape that we have the support and the alliance that can provide that knowledge, the resource, the support that we so desperately need to be successful and to change the trajectory of progress in our communities and our world.
Appreciate that, Rev. Ms. Monica, as I come to you, I think there's a verse that says you will know them by their works. What are your expectations for medium and large size organizations in relationship to our communities?
Yes, I think Dr. Nataki and Reverend Woodsbury hit the nail on the head. It really is about collaboration and leaning into the expertise that all bring to the table. I would say to our intermediary partners, as Dr. Nataki talked about, this is not the time to become weary in well-doing. This is the season to lean in to the expertise of not only community, but also the values that many of those that claim to be champions of environmental justice espouse. So we need you to live your values. We also, if we're going to lean into some scripture, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but one of love and a power and a sound mind. So if we have the power of collective energy, we have the power of believing and understanding who we are. We have the agency and the groundedness that technology and innovation and policy creation are at our fingertips. Then there is nothing that is unachievable or impossible. I think where we are right now is that we have a phenomenal opportunity in spite of, and this is where I lean in spite of what it looks like, in spite of those oppositions that are in place to rail against us, that we have at our disposal a righteous understanding that the work that we do is for the betterment of all mankind. I believe that every energy and power that's good and of good report is leaning in with us. Now we must decide at this point, are we going to get shaky and nervous and turn back, or are we going to lean in and move forward? And that moving forward will consist of everything at our disposal and even things that we have not even thought of. This is a time for us to look at power mapping, to look at asset mapping. Who has what skill, what talent, what training among us at every level. This is where intermediaries can be helpful. This is a time also to be a bridge of conversations with philanthropy. This is not the time for them to abandon state and local policy work for this illusion that they are going to be able to shift all of their funding to a federal move of resistance, or to believe that they can capitulate to this administration and somehow get some kind of political favor. So that too must be the understanding as we move forward. And then the last thing I'll say is that we have an opportunity to be an innovator. And as Grace Lee Boggs, who was a revolutionary leader here in Detroit, would say, we are the solutionaries to our own crisis. There is nothing that has been done that community has not already sought a signal that this is direction we need to go. I have to remind people the Flint water crisis didn't move forward because somebody decided that it was awful to poison 100,000 people. It became an international story because the people rolled up their sleeves and did citizen science to evidence the harms that had happened to them. The Detroit water crisis did not become a national and international story and did not bring in the United Nations because somebody decided it's awful to shut off 171,000 households. It was community that organized themselves and used their genius to file a complaint that brought the rapporteurs to the city of Detroit to evidence things that we have been saying for over a decade. It was not Jackson, Mississippi, that all of a sudden people cared about poor Black folks in Jackson, Mississippi. It was them being able to evidence that the water harms that they were experiencing were unimaginable and they could not be tolerated in what is considered an advanced nation. And so these all are giving us an opportunity to deputize ourselves, to become the leaders in our own revolutionary moment of making sure we leave the world better than we found it. In the words of the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young, he said, if you find a good fight, get in it. So I would encourage everybody to join all of us and get in this fight to make sure that every right, not only the human right to water and air, but every justice is adhered to on our watch. So I'm excited to be in the fight. Let's go, Mustafa.
All right. Amen, sister.
You got me excited over here. I'm talking
Let's
about
go.
that part.
Let's go.
That part. Appreciate you. Much, much love. And of course, I now have to go to my spiritual advisor, my mentor, my everything,
Yes.
Diane Dillon Ridgely. Can you share some words with us?
Well, you know, I love poetry and words. I'm going to borrow some and I'm going to change them a little bit because it needs a little expansion. The people are speaking, and the people, when they speak, no longer will wait and we cannot be stopped. We're poised on the edge of the future. No map before us, a taste of fear sharp on our tongue, but we're going to leap. And the exercise of imagining is the act of creation. The act of creation is an exercise of will. And yeah, this is political, but it's also possible. Bread, a clean sky, active peace, voices greeting each other with love and openness. The army disbanded, the harvest abundant, the wound healed, the child wanted, the prisoner freed, the body's integrity honored, the lover returned, the labor equal, fair, and valued. No hand raised in any gesture but greeting. Now, we will make it real. We're going to make it our own. We're going to make policy. We're going to make history. We're going to make peace, make it available, make mischief, make a difference, even make love, make the connections, make a miracle, make ready. But you got to believe it. Believe it, my sisters and my brothers, for we are the ones who will transform the world. Good night.
I love that. I love that. See, they wasn't expecting, they didn't know they was going to have poetry night as well as all of these amazing leaders sharing all these life lessons. I'm about to turn it over to Dr. Hollis so that we could close out, but I just want to give honor to my grandparents who passed these words down to my parents, who folks have heard me share all across the planet. Is you have power unless you give it away. So let's utilize our power in a loving way, in an uplifting way, in a way that actually helps to make sure that we have an environment that is thriving and that we have communities who are no longer unseen or unheard and are honored. And with that being said, Dr. Hollis, the mic is yours.
Thank you. And I just want to thank everybody, my panelists and the audience who came, and I because y'all have moved me so much, I'm gonna give a quote too. And this is what I did in my keynote, which was really, you guys said the very same thing: collaboration, partnership, leadership, step back, step up, work together, all the things. And this is from one of our favorites, one of my dear favorites, the late Congressman John Lewis. Ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one presidency. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes. And each of us in every generation must do our part. And I think that, you've gotten a lot of messages here tonight. Please take them to heart. I will. And I just want to thank you all so much for, being that voice, that push, that direction that we all need. And I wanted to ask you if you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share with the audience. Please do so. And before you do that, I would like to thank the people in the back room, the EJ program, who are making all of these things happen that we don't even know. They're working magic. and they're texting me and, keeping things rolling. They're the boss and I'm doing whatever they tell me to do. But I'd like to invite you to say any parting words before we close out. Anybody? Nobody? Anybody? Mustafa? Oh, Reverend Woodbury came off mute.
Yeah, I would say this. What we have to realize is that what we're creating is beyond issues, it's beyond policy, it's beyond politics. What we are crafting is a new social construct. And social constructs are based on belief, value, culture that actually embeds our beliefs, our values, etc., in the way we sing, the way we write, the way we dress, etc. And the final pillar for social construct is education. And so we've all talked about that, but we really need to figure out how we can capture our common beliefs, values, and put that together with our culture so that we are building a new construct that is not exploitive, that is not destructive, but instead creates the world that all of us should live in. And thank you so much to my colleagues, National Wildlife Federation, Mustafa, Dr. Hollis, and each and every one of you who make the work that we do possible, along with the successes we are having.
Excellent.
Reverend Woodbury.
Thanks so much, Reverend Dr. Dr. Hollis, just wanted to make sure that people know that on October the 29th here in Michigan, we are moving forward with policy being introduced for affordable water now. National Wildlife has been a major partner with us in advancing this. This has been in the works since 2015. So over a decade of partnership and working to finally get a policy that reflects true water affordability. And we believe that it actually is going to be the template for the nation to ensure that other states adopt this same right and privilege to make sure that all persons have water. We would welcome all of you not only to push this out, but to weigh in terms of your support. And we are hoping to see Ohio replicate this very policy within the next few weeks. So once again, the details are there in the link, and I will share even a call-in link that people can share throughout their network. It makes a difference when you have partners outside of your state call in support of the work that you're doing within your state.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Monica. Thank you so much.
This is the justice century, and it's up to us to just make this century just.
Exactly. Well spoken. Thank you so much.
I wanted to give I'm sorry.
No. I was
If
going to say, I
could.
was going to ask if there was anything else, any more announcements, anything?
Sure. This is an announcement. If there happen to be folks who are tuned in tonight who are in Atlanta, I just wanted to elevate that on Wednesday, this Wednesday, October 22nd, Wawa is having its 4th annual Urban Water Symposium. None other than my sister, the water warrior herself, Monica Lewis Patrick, is going to be our opening keynote speaker. We'll also have Brenda Coley from Milwaukee Water Commons as well. So you can find registration information on Wawa's website. It's open for about 3 more hours. www.wawa.online.org if you're in the Atlanta area. And when Diana kind of talked about the Justice Century, it reminded me of this quote from Reverend Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. I live in Atlanta, so if it's not King that's being quoted, it's Benjamin Elijah Mays who's being quoted. And he has this saying, and I'll kind of adapt it just a little bit. And it says, we have only just a minute.
Just a minute.
Only 60 seconds in it, forced upon us, can't refuse it, didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to us to use it. We must suffer if we lose it, give account if we abuse it. Just a tiny little minute. but eternity is in it. Just keep the faith, y'all. There's a lot of hard work that we have to do, and we have to keep doing it in this moment, because this too shall pass, as I said before, and we're going to get to that moment in which we can fully advance everything that we're trying to move now to really make this the justice century that Diane talked about. So just wanted to close with that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Mustafa, for serving as an excellent moderator. We appreciate you and your leadership. And I will give everybody back 5 minutes. Have
We'll
a
take it.
beautiful evening.
Hug a child.
Hug a child. Okay.
No, I'm serious. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.